Today, I'm joined by Alex Popken, Senior Vice President of Trust and Safety at Web Purify, an InTouch CX company, and all-round TNS veteran. We're making some predictions for trust and safety in 2026. And we've got 5 predictions, 5 that we are genuinely willing to bet our houses on, covering everything from youth access to social media, to whether humans will be replaced, to the impact of AI companion app, and even whether 2026 could be the year we finally defeat online, non-consensual, intimate imagery for good.
The internet wasn't built with safety in mind. But today, there's a huge community of online trust and safety experts, not just building the rules, but enforcing them too. I'm Ailish Daly, and this is Trust Issues, insights from the people who keep the internet safe. In each edition, we meet the experts shaping how the world experiences the internet, what's allowed online, what's not, and the future of how platforms will protect people. Let's share knowledge and build a safer internet together.
Alex, have you got your tarot cards ready?
I do, and I am so excited to be on your acclaimed pod, Ailish.
Amazing. Well, good. And I've also wafted some sage around the place. I've consulted all the positions, all the celestial bodies. So let's go for it. Our first prediction is a big one. It's the expansion of youth bans across social media and generally platforms taking youth safety seriously, right? And honestly, the world is about to enter a moment of massive acceleration when it comes to banning young people from social platforms. I suppose what began as a handful of isolated proposals has quickly turned into what looks like an early stage global normalization, a future where under 16s may simply not have access to mainstream social media at all, or certainly not in the form that we know it today. Maybe as a starting point, we should probably take a little quick global snapshot for anyone who may not be up to speed. So, on the 10th of December, Australia will become the first country to fully legislate a ban on users under 16 having social media accounts. So Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, X, the whole slate. And the momentum is building. Malaysia is announced a similar nationwide ban coming into force in 2026. Denmark is looking to implement an under 15 ban with a narrow exemption for 13 to 14-year-olds if they have parental consent. Last week, the European Parliament proposed a minimum age of 16 for social media and AI companions with parental exemption opt-in for 13 to 16-year-olds. And they're also backing an EU-wide age verification app and the European Digital Identity Wallet, but with safeguards around accuracy, privacy, and no weakening of platform duties. What's very interesting is that members of the European Parliament even proposed personal liability for senior managers who repeatedly fail to protect minors. So that's another interesting layer to this. In the US, things are probably slower, even though there's a lot of talk about it. We see that there's a lot of things that are kind of stuck in the slow wheels of legislative process. COSMA, or the Kids Off Social Media Act, and also COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, are progressing, and they both share this objective of protecting children online. COSA attempts to achieve this goal with broad requirements that are aimed at making the platforms minors use much safer. COSMA, on the other hand, aims to protect children from social media by prohibiting minors under the age of 13, so 13, not 16, from creating or maintaining social media accounts, and prohibiting social media companies from targeted content to minors using algorithms. What's interesting is a lot of the social media platforms already advise that there shouldn't be any users under 13 for them. So that's, I suppose, an interesting space. But as we said, they are all stuck in the machinery of American legislative process. So a full teen ban is less likely for now. But other territories leaning more towards strict age verification, parental consent pathways, and minimum age thresholds. Ireland, which houses the majority of social media companies' EMEA HQs, also joined the wave, with the government signalling last week plans for age verification measures that could effectively bar under 16s from major platforms. I was on the radio myself a lot this week debating this. So, yes, this isn't fringe policy anymore. This is real, accelerating shift in youth access to digital spaces. The political momentum is strong, but enforcement is the real challenge. And policymakers, they want visible action, and parents are demanding solution. But the key question remains, can these bans actually be enforced? And will they keep young people safer or push them into more hidden, unregulated spaces online? Alex, what are your thoughts around this?
For the under 16 ban in Australia, first and foremost, that is a pioneering piece of legislation. And to your point, I think we are going to see other countries begin to adopt similar legislation. Interestingly, I was on TikTok last night and I saw a video of the e-safety commissioner in Australia talking about this ban. Couple of interesting points. She was talking about withdrawals. And so for teens who have been online and have been using these apps, they may face real withdrawal symptoms in being told that they can no longer be on them, right? So that will be interesting to just see what are the mechanisms by which Australia attempts to support the youth that by law should no longer be on these social media apps. I think the second thing that was interesting is in the comments, most people were expressing support for the ban. And I actually found that surprising. There was a comment to the effect of, as someone who belongs to Gen Z, I agree with this. This was so necessary for us, meaning Gen Z, but no one stood up for us. And so it's just interesting to see that even youth, as part of Gen Z, are largely supportive of this ban and what that really means in terms of the harms that they may have experienced growing up with unfettered access, right?
And we experience this ourselves. We have created an ebook around this exact topic at Web Purify, where we invited experts in the space of youth wellness to give their input into the impact of a social media ban. And we did have the input of a young person as part of that conversation. And she, interestingly, had given the perspective that she would love there to be a ban of social media for under 16s. And she could see the glorious benefits of that. So interesting that that perspective is being mirrored in some of the comments as well.
Absolutely. And I think to your earlier point, we know that this is not going to be legislation with parity globally. We know that platforms aren't going to do this perfectly, right? They have to take reasonable efforts here. And then we also know that children are clever and they will find ways to circumvent this ban. And so the real question for me is, knowing that children inevitably will end up online, what are platforms doing to make that experience safer? A child's experience on an app should be much different than an adult's, but you and I know that that hasn't always been the case. Historically, platforms have relied on self reported ages, and that is so easy to lie about and bypass. And so platforms have historically used these inferred, oftentimes incorrect ages when determining how to treat a particular user on their site. So it's going to be interesting to see what efforts they take beyond banning to ensure that the experience for youth is different than that for adults. Interestingly, I saw that Roblox, and you probably saw this too, rolled out technology to estimate a user's age by analyzing images of their face. And the goal here is to prevent children and teens from, chatting with unfamiliar older users. And also they're going to use this data, I think, to comply with the ban in Australia. So that is obviously a great development. And, we know that that system won't be perfect, but I think it's far more effective than relying on self-reported ages and hopefully a sign of where the industry is headed.
I couldn't agree with you more, Alex. Platforms can't rely on self-reporting ages anymore, and Roblox is a really important example of why. Roblox has faced huge criticism because very young children can encounter inappropriate content or interact with adults unsupervised. And unlike traditional social media, which is at least designed for 13 plus, there's no minimum age to open a Roblox account. So that means that the vulnerability of their users is significantly higher, and the harm some very young children are experiencing are deeply worrying. Now, Roblox often points to bad actors and the scale they operate at. And yes, tens of millions do have an incredibly positive experience. But the safety expectations for a platform serving millions of under 13s are they have to be far higher. And there is this real call from parents, the public, governments for stronger protections. But there's also this tension that I find really interesting. When Roblox announced it was increasing spending on safety and infrastructure, its share price dropped about 15%. So investors will treat safety, even child safety, as an overhead. And I think that's quite shocking. Like, the safest platforms should be the most valuable, but that's not how the market works, right? So if we want real progress, we may need both the stick of regulation and the carrot of incentives to support safety investment. I think that's, something that always strikes me as a bit of an interesting one. We talk about the role of parents, of users, of regulators, of platforms. But sometimes we don't talk about the power of investment in those platforms and their responsibility. And I think we need to stop treating young people as one homogenous group. An 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old need completely different protections. So the future, it isn't just better age assurance, it's age appropriate design that reflects real developmental stages. And finally, I think if our prediction that social media bans for under 16s snowballs into 2026, people need to start thinking about those young people that are impacted. And you mentioned this earlier, the withdrawal, losing access to where you connect with friends, communities, and resources. That can be immensely isolating. And that's the gap in current policy making. We're removing teens without building what comes next. So if governments are determined to remove teens from digital spaces, there must be equal investment in offline youth programs, community spaces, and safe alternative digital environments. Otherwise, we're going to just solve one safety problem and create a loneliness crisis. Our second prediction of 2026, and this kind of is relevant to our last one, is the rise of companion apps, especially among young people. Probably as a result, right, of the wave of social media bans and the potential rise in isolation if investment in the youth spaces isn't made. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on AI companions and what does 2026 hold for them?
I think we're going to face a real reckoning here. At you might remember there was that tragic case of a 14-year-old who took his own life after a character AI persona allegedly encouraged him to do so. After this incident and other lawsuits and criticism, character AI has since chosen to ban children from talking to its chatbots. We know that these chatbots have the tendency to be overly sycophantic and to make mistakes. And sadly, some of those mistakes can be deadly. I do hope here that, regulation, lawsuits, and new research into the impacts of chatbots on youth will encourage AI companies to take it seriously and consider bans for certain age groups, as Character AI has since done. And then I also obviously encourage AI companies to really invest in safety. The time to invest in safety is not post production after a tragic incident has occurred. It's pre production. It is, actively red teaming the system. It is ensuring that you're investing in trust and safety teams, that those safeguards are in place. And then, of course, those efforts are ongoing. It's not a one and done exercise. So curious to see how this evolves. And I do think companion apps aren't going anywhere. I think we're going to see an increase in them, and it's going to be telling to see which AI companies actually invest in these safeguards.
Yeah, and for me, the prediction isn't just AI companions will rise. It is that regulators, that parents and the public will demand a completely different safety standard for this kind of AI that imitates relationships. I wondered if there really is enough of an understanding yet of the power of these companion apps. I think folks might actually not realize just how powerful they are and the impact that they have. And, this new safety standard, it is going to have to include, the things like the age gating, the rigorous testing that you spoke about for harmful outputs, genuine investment in safety teams. We don't just want disclaimers that are buried in the terms of service that you sign up for when you download the app. And it also kind of goes back to my point earlier about removing teens from social media has consequences. And if one of those consequences of removing them from their digital spaces where they've grown a presence without building anything healthier, then they will naturally turn to the tools that are in the zeitgeist and that talk back to them, sometimes or oftentimes without judgment. And unless we reshape those tools now, we risk swapping one set of harms again for another. So in 2026, I think the question won't be whether companion apps, rise. Of course they will. The real question is whether we've built them to be safe for the most vulnerable users who will turn to them first.
Right. And I think similar to our earlier comment that historically the experience for youth online has been largely similar to the experience of adults. I think that really is the case for companion apps currently, right? And so to my knowledge, there isn't a commercially popular companion app that is geared towards youth exclusively, right? And so they're using these apps that adults are using, they're having largely the same experience, and yet we know that they are a vulnerable population. They're, going through difficult times in their lives and they're turning to these apps for comfort, for guidance. And yet they're not as advanced as adults in really understanding the harms. And so I do hope that we see further developments here when AI companies really taking this seriously and taking a stand for their most vulnerable users.
One of my favorite things that I've seen around AI companion discussions is like couples, whatever format that relationship takes, using AI companion apps to help them win an argument against their spouse or their partner. So, yeah, we should test that out as well. The third prediction then we have, and this is one of your big predictions, right, Alex?
That's right.
Is that humans will still matter in 2026. Can
And
you
still
talk about this a bit more?
and still matter as it relates to content moderation, which of course is our bread and butter. I think speaking of safety in AI, right, my prediction for 2026 is simple here. Humans are still going to be absolutely essential in content moderation. And just speaking about actually the AI piece of this a bit for people's knowledge, AI has actually been part of moderation for almost 20 years. Early models weren't anything like today's Gen AI. They were basic machine learning classifiers, but they did do and still do a lot of heavy lifting, with content enforcement at scale, and they have kept improving. Now, particularly this year and then into next year, we're entering a phase where LLMs can genuinely supercharge moderation, particularly because of their contextual, up to date, and understanding. And there's a lot of actually really cool experimentation happening here and companies that are, you know, geared towards providing this Gen AI for content moderation purposes. But getting there at scale, in my opinion, will take time. Policy decisions, nuance, context, intent, these aren't easy calls. And a lot of moderation work is incredibly complex, both on the policy side, but also on the operational side. And it still is, quite human dependent. I think even if organizations wanted to go all in on AI tomorrow, most, quite frankly, don't have the maturity, infrastructure, or budget to deploy LLMs at true production scale. We're finding that it is quite expensive and resource intensive. And that's not to say that those blockers will be the case for, the foreseeable future, but I think they will continue to be roadblocks in 2026. And then also here's the irony, moderating AI requires humans, a lot of them.
Mhm.
People are needed to label data sets that train the AI, to QA model outputs, to write and refine prompts, to review edge cases and red team, risky scenarios. Realistically, this has actually provided a whole new category of human in the loop moderation. So the point is, AI will speed things up in 2026, and it already has, but humans will remain the backbone of trustworthy enforcement in 2026. I think the future is going to continue to be hybrid and not humanless. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, Ailish.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think AI is, of course, transforming trust and safety. But for anyone listening who's worried about being replaced, relax. 2026 is not the year humans become obsolete. So you can cancel your early retirement plans.
Exactly.
Right then, Alex, our very own trust and safety Nostradamus, give us your next prediction, a wise one.
Yep. My next prediction is that 2026 is going to be the year that we really grapple with content authenticity. Funny enough, Alicia, I saw that rage bait is Oxford's word of the year. I'm calling it now. AI slop might take the cake in 2026. And yes, both are somehow two words. And so I'm not sure how they qualify, but here we are. So AI slop basically refers to low quality, mass produced AI content, and it's everywhere. If you open TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you see it everywhere. Some forecasts even suggest that by 2026, close to 90% of all web content could be AI generated. That is staggering. And
Mhm,
candidly, I even feel that shift across platforms when I'm using social. So
mhm,
here's the thing though, while a lot of AI content is noisy and low effort, there's also a growing wave of high quality, convincing AI output. In some cases, it's genuinely hard to tell what's real versus fake. And I think that's actually a sobering thought when you imagine the fallout of seeing, for example, a public figure appear to say something that they never said, right? There, the consequences are very real.
mhm.
I think what most people don't realize is how difficult this is to enforce from a trust and safety standpoint. So just think about it. AI generated doesn't automatically equal harmful. Think about that Pope in a puffer jacket moment from 2023. It was totally fabricated, extremely believable. But the real question is it dangerous? Should it be removed? Does it cause real world harm? These are the gray zones that trust and safety teams are going to be navigating for a long time, and certainly in 2026. TikTok, Instagram, and others have started using AI labels, and I'm sure people have seen those affixed to content. But the reality is that those policies and processes are still evolving, and a lot of it depends upon self reporting. And we know when we talked about age verification that self reporting is just not an effective mechanism. On the tech side, companies are experimenting with watermarking, cryptographic metadata, and other measures to verify authenticity and provenance. Those are the terms that are often used here. And actually, Google recently rolled out a Gemini feature that analyzes an image and tells you if it was created with Google AI. Now, I think that's helpful, but it's not telling you whether content was created from other AIs, right? So it's helpful only in specific use cases. So really, I think it only scratches the surface of what's needed. Regardless, mark my words, this is going to be a big focus for companies and trust and safety teams in 2026.
And I mean, Alex, I think about the late Pope in his puffer jacket every single day. Fashion pinnacle moment. Um,
Exactly.
but I also think about the much darker side of this. And beyond even image, the really sophisticated frauds that can use AI generated voices
Right.
to trick someone like my dad into transferring money and, possibly using audio lifted from this very podcast. And that to me is why the tech investment here needs to be enormous and not just to curb AI slop, but to mitigate genuinely high risk harms. And honestly, I hope markets start responding positively to companies that invest in safety instead of punishing them with a stock drop.
Right.
Because and I think we all agree on this in the trust and safety world that protecting users shouldn't be treated like an overhead. But it's not also just about tech. This is a public health issue now. We live so much of our lives online. We work, we shop, we bank, we date, we socialize, we learn. And yet our digital literacy is nowhere near where it needs to be. So if 2026 is going to be the year of AI everything, it also has to be the year we inoculate people against AI scams, against AI manipulation, and education has to catch up with the reality that we're living in.
Right. And I think, on the flip side of people being more trustworthy than they should be, there's also a pervasive harm if people start distrusting everything that they see online. It's like, where are people then getting information? Right. And so I think both sides of the equation are harmful. There are groups, there's the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, or C2PA, that's creating standards around, how we can indicate how something was created and by whom. But the problem that we tend to see in tech with regulation, with standards, is that it's adopted piecemeal, right? We see that it's enforced in different ways, by different jurisdictions. We see that some companies adopt certain measures and others don't. And not only does that make it extremely difficult for the rank and file trust and safety employees who are really trying to do right by their users, but are grappling with all of these various challenges coming at them, but it also makes the user experience pretty inconsistent as well. And so I would love to get to a place where we have more consensus and standardization. That's my hope. I don't know in practice if we're actually going to see that play out next year.
Maybe 2036. Okay. We'll bring that one back
Possibly.
up then. Last but not least, in my crystal ball, I think 2026 could, and I emphasize could, finally be the year we see real industry wide progress in stopping non consensual intimate imagery, or NCII, from spreading online. And here's the thing, Alex, the technology already exists. We don't need a moonshot. We need adoption. One of the most promising and genuinely survivor centered tools that is out there is Stop NCII. And that is run by the UK's Revenge Porn Helpline and supported by Meta and a growing network of platforms. Last year, Stop NCII protected 2 million images, nearly double the year before, and supported hundreds of thousands of survivors globally. Regulators like Ofcom have publicly called it a leading model for proactive NCII prevention. I actually first dug into this technology in detail with Emily Harman, who advises Stop NCII and is a former trust and safety lead at OnlyFans and a friend of Web Purifies. We co-authored a thought leadership piece last year where we talked about hashing as the future of NCII prevention. Emily has been such a strong advocate for practical privacy preserving solutions that actually work for survivors. And for folks who may not be aware, here's how Stop NCII works. So a survivor processes the image locally. So the image never leaves their device. The tool generates hashes, so these unique digital fingerprints. Those hashes are shared securely with participating platforms. So if anyone tries to upload the same image, the platform can block it proactively before it's ever published. It's anonymous, it's proactive, it gives control back to the survivor. And here's the part that matters the most for 2026. There are already major partners who have signed up for this: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Discord, Reddit, Snapchat, OnlyFans, Pornhub, and more. But there's actually only 17 in total. This list should be endless.
Right.
If your platform has an upload image button, integrating Stop NCII should be a default expectation. Because at this point, the question is no longer, can we stop NCII? We absolutely can. We can. The real question is, why haven't all platforms committed to doing this yet? And Stop NCII is only one part of the ecosystem. There's also Cyber Tipline, run by NECMEC, which helps remove explicit images of minors from anywhere online. In that case, survivors provide URLs, analysts contact the platforms directly, and they keep pushing until the content is removed. They also support families through the process, which is often as important as the removal itself. And for young people who don't know where an intimate image may have ended up, there's Take It Down, which lets them anonymously create hash values for images of themselves so platforms can detect and remove them even without a URL. So much like Stop NCII works. So these tools, they already work, they're proven. What's missing is scale and universal adoption. Now, here's where I think 2026 gets interesting, because we're going to see, and to our earlier point, a surge in AI generated images. And that will include AI generated intimate images, including deepfakes and nudification, which hash matching alone can't always detect. So that's why regulators like the UK with its 2025 AI child safety legislation are already requiring platforms and developers to block this material by design. And in the US, new laws like Take It Down Act are criminalizing NCII and mandating rapid removal, including synthetic deepfakes. So, yes, we need hashing, but we also need better detection of synthetic intimate imagery. As you said, global regulatory alignment, industry wide protocols, and far greater public awareness, because reporting, as you can imagine, remains incredibly low. The stigma associated with this type of a violation is enormous. Many survivors don't even know that these tools exist. I would suggest if many trust and safety professionals don't know that these tools exist, then how would survivors who don't even work in this industry know that they exist? So, my prediction, and honestly, my hope, is that 2026 becomes the year protecting consent online stops being optional. It's the year that NCII prevention becomes table stakes for operating any digital platform, a year where the safest platforms aren't the exception, they're the standard.
And I think we are operating in a situation in which companies have policies around this. They agree that even AI generated intimate imagery is extremely harmful. And so, if the tools exist, to your point, the question is, why aren't more people using them? Why aren't more people joining the fight? Agree that this feels table stakes and needs to be adopted more widely in 2026.
And that's it, our 5 predictions for 2026 in the world of trust and safety. I suspect that we'll be chatting about this next year. And, on one hand, looking at this list and finding that many of our predictions came true. But of course, we know that trust and safety and the online world is very unpredictable in many ways. So there'll be a lot of things that crop up when we reconvene in December of 2026 and look back on what has panned out. And there's going to be some corkers in there that nobody will have predicted. Would you agree?
I would agree. I look forward to doing a retro with you this time next year. And one thing I will say in looking at this list, hoping that we see positive momentum on many fronts, but certainly there is job security for the trust and safety community. There is a ton of work here to do together.
And with that, we better go back and start doing our day jobs. So thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Ailish.
Thanks for tuning in to Trust Issues, brought to you by Web Purify, an InTouch CX company. What are your thoughts on today's conversation? And what do you want to hear about next? Get in touch with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to keep the discussion going. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories, insights, and behind-the-scenes voices from the world of trust and safety.